Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scientific Reasoning Module 2. I'm Hui Wang. Today, we will focus on reasoning process. We particularly will share three types of reasoning: deductive, inductive, and adaptive reasoning. First, let's review what scientific reasoning is. Scientific reasoning is encompass core reasoning and problem-solving competence. Scientific reasoning involves process of inquiry, scientific investigation, evidence evaluation, inference, and interpreting results as evidence that support or refutes the hypothesis and or acquire new information. In Module 1, we have discussed what data, evidence, and inference are and factors that have impact on the quality of data and evidence. And today, we'll particularly focus on the reasoning process, which we will discuss deductive, inductive, and adaptive reasoning. What is reasoning? Reasoning comes in diverse forms, such as everyday decision making, for example, paying with a credit card or cash, or making a decision that impacts society, for example, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has expanded recommendation for COVID-19 booster shot to all adults aged 18 years old. Those are the times a person needs to make a decisions. Reasoning is the ability to assess things rationally and logically based on new or existing information when individuals make a decision or solving a problem. Using COVID-19 booster shots as example, a STEM literate citizen review all the information, which including data and evidence, from credible sources to decide if he or she will get the booster shot is conducting scientific reasoning. There are many types of reasoning in this module. We particularly focus on deductive reasoning, which also is known as theory-based reasoning, inductive reasoning, which also is known as evidence-based reasoning, and adaptive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is individuals searching for patterns or instances of evidence present to test a hypothesis. When doing deductive reasoning, individuals ponder if the hypothesis is true, what things should be observed that support the hypothesis. That's using Delphi case from Module 1 to give you examples. On February 13, 2017, what made police believe that Abby and Libby were missing and starting searching for them? If we assume Abby and Libby are missing, what evidence we might find to support that hypothesis? From the timeline, which was organized by the Uncovered website in Module 1, we know Abby and Libby did not answer the call, and no family members and their friends had heard from Abby and Libby between 3:50 to 4:20 in the afternoon when Abby's father supposedly need to pick them up, and no one has heard anything from them. This evidence support the hypothesis that Abby and Libby are missing. The inductive reasoning is individuals have prior knowledge on theory that is used to exempt the evidence present to generate a patterns or findings and hypothesis. When doing inductive reasoning, an individual asks, what is the likelihood of the hypothesis based on the available evidence? It is a common sense that we know a missing person means someone who disappeared and is no longer in communication with their family and friends. From the timelines, from the uncovered website, we gathered evidence that no family members and the girls' friends had not heard from them between 3:50 to 4:20 in the afternoon, when they were supposed to be picked up by Libby's father. We assume very likely Abby and Libby are missing. Please note, the reasoning is a very complicated process. It is very likely when a person is conducting reasoning, the individual is mixing both inductive and deductive reasoning to make a decision. In this slide and the previous slide, we use the same information which can be considered as evidence to show how the deductive and inductive reasoning are different for the educational purpose. As for adaptive reasoning, it is when looking at evidence. An individual has a very little or no existing knowledge and want to make the best guess to the simplest conclusion. It is similar to inductive reasoning. Differences is that when doing inductive reasoning, a person has prior knowledge that he or she is very certain about. On the other hand, if it is adaptive reasoning, due to a person has very little or no existing knowledge, he or she made a decision based on intuition. Therefore, adaptive reasoning mostly is used to generate a hypothesis. Using Delphi murder case as an example, we know that there is an audio recording evidence down the hill in Libby's cell phone. In a podcast from the Uncovered website, based on the recording, the host make a hypothesis that the murderer knew where to direct the girl to go to avoid other visitors. Therefore, the host of the podcast make a best guess that the murder is from the local area or someone who knows the trail very well. Because the murder happens in a very short time, about 45 minutes. However, to prove this statement, we need more evidence. Again, reasoning is a very complicated process. It is possible when scientists and police try to solve a crime case, they use all three types of reasoning to exempt the same evidence. In Module 1, we have discussed the quality of data and evidence. We know quality of evidence and data will impact the inference. This can also apply to reasoning, because reasoning is an attempt to figure out questions or to solve problems. Therefore, reasoning should be based on the data and evidence. Now, let's switch the gear. Let's check what type of reasoning that you use to complete your worksheets in Module 1. Please make a guess. What type of reasoning? Deductive, inductive, adductive reasoning did you use the most in the Delphi murder activity? Please pause the module here. Resume the module after you analyze your reasoning process. You can make kind of like a concept map, like what I showed earlier in the earlier slides. Or you can just write it down your reasoning process through analyze the worksheet. Please pause the module here. Okay, here is an example of my reasoning process. Based on the information that I gathered from the Uncover website, I made a hypothesis that murder happens between 2:15 to 3 p.m. in the forest of Southside's the Mana High Bridge. The three important evidences support this hypothesis were: first, the video of the bridge guide that Levy captures at 2:15 p.m. Shagan's testimony that she did not see the girl when she took pictures on the Manana High Bridge around 3 p.m. And the girl's body was found in the forest of the south side of the bridge. Okay. Based on the Delphi historical trails system, I know that Delphi historical trail system is complicated and there are 8 miles of rural open space. Based on my hypothesis, in part 1, I'm providing some inference hypothesis in part 2. I think the murder happens between 2:15 to 3:30 in part 1. 3 o'clock p.m. in part 1 in the forest of south side of Mana High Bridge, which was a very short time, about 45 minutes. Based on the information from the Uncovered website, there were other visitors who visited the bridge between 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Although it might not be called a popular place, the evidence shows there were people visit the bridge and the trail. Levy captured the videos of the killer at 2:15. The killer told the girl down the hill. The killer know the trails and tried to direct the girls to a place where other visitors might not visit when they hike the trail. 45 minutes was a very short time to murder 2 girls. Therefore, I think, very likely, the killer is from the local area, as the podcast host says, or someone who knows the trail very well. As an educator, there are tools that could help you organize your reasoning process. MindMap is a free online tool that you can use to help you or your students to accept reasoning process. As you can see, I'm using all the 3 types of reasoning. The reasoning map actually was even more complicated than I have presented here. Now you might ask, why this matter? Why we're doing this? Well, when I did the Delphi murder activity, I was generating hypotheses and making inferences unconsciously. And then I thought I was making the right conclusion and inference because they were based on evidence. After I analyzed my reasoning process, I realized I use a lot of adaptive reasoning, which I used the very limited evidence and then plus my creativity to come up with hypothesis that I thought it was the correct conclusion. If I did not conduct the self-reflections on my own reasoning process, I might make a false conclusion that was based on 1% of evidence and 99% of imaginations, but I might still insist that I was correct. The self reflection process helped me see I need to be cautious about the decision and conclusion that I made, where I need more evidence to support my hypothesis or inference, and why I might be making incorrect inference. People unconsciously do reasoning. We might get fooled by our brain that we thought we are doing reasoning or making decisions based on evidence. But it might be possible that the decision we made was based on 1% of evidence but 99% of imaginations. Okay, that reflects on the module 2. Did you make the right guess about your reasoning process? Why or why not? Please complete those reflection questions in the Google Classroom. Based on the definition of the scientific reasoning, let's recap what's a scientific reasoning definition. Scientific reasoning encompasses core reasoning and problem-solving competence. Scientific reasoning involves process of inquiry, scientific investigation, evidence evaluation, inference, and interpretation results as evidence that support or refute the hypothesis and or acquire new information. Do you think we use the scientific reasoning in the Delphi murder activity? Why or why not? In the next module, we will focus on scientific investigation, which is another important part of the conducting scientific reasoning. Designing and conducting scientific investigations such as generations of hypotheses and systematically testing a hypothesis is important domain journal knowledge and a skill to do scientific reasoning. Here are the references for this module. Hopefully you'll enjoy this module. The project is funded by USDA NIFA to promote STEM and agriculture literacy. I'd like to thank Dr. Nabla and graduate students Brianna Nielsen, who reviewed the module and gave constructive feedback. Also, Dr. Crystal Hans, who helped review the contents and ensure that I provide accurate information about the Delphi murder in the module. Thank you so much for watching the module. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions.